So you think you would thrive in ancient Rome? You imagine yourself in a shining white toga, walking confidently through marble streets, admired by everyone around you. Maybe you even picture yourself sipping wine in a villa attended by servants, while soft music plays in the background. Sounds romantic, doesn't it? Well, let's ruin that fantasy right now. The truth is, you wouldn't last a single day in the Roman Empire. Not even a comfortable afternoon. Why? Because the Rome you're dreaming of is the one in movies, not the one that actually existed. Let's start with the streets. You're probably imagining wide, clean roads lined with beautiful columns and statues. In reality, most Roman streets were narrow, dark, and smelled worse than you can imagine. Why? Because sanitation was more of an idea than a rule. People threw garbage straight out of their windows. Rotting food, animal waste, and even worse things, yes, all of it piled up in the gutters. The air was a mix of sweat, sewage, and smoke from open fires. If you're feeling uncomfortable already, good. You're starting to get the picture, Dotto, and forget sidewalks. Most streets were uneven stone paths where carts rattled by all day and night. There were no traffic rules, no peaceful pedestrian zones. If you didn't move fast enough, you risked getting hit by a cart or stepped on by a horse. You'd also have to watch your step carefully unless you wanted to end up with something very unpleasant stuck to your sandals. Now, let's talk about the people. Rome was crowded, really crowded. Imagine tens of thousands of people packed together in tiny spaces with no concept of personal space. You'd be brushing shoulders with merchants yelling prices, beggars asking for coins, soldiers pushing through, and slaves carrying heavy loads for their masters. Everyone was loud. Everyone was busy surviving. And you just stand there, overwhelmed, realizing you have no clue how anything works, still think you're special. Let's see where you'd fit in the Roman social hierarchy. Spoiler alert. Unless you were born into a powerful family, you'd probably be at the bottom. Rome was all about class. Patricians, the rich elite, ruled everything. They had the luxury of villas, education, and servants. Plebeians, the common people, struggled every day to earn a single denarius just to buy stale bread. And then there were slaves who were treated like property with no rights at all, so where would you land? Unless you have royal blood hiding somewhere in your family tree, you're probably either a plebeian or worse. You'd spend your days doing exhausting labor, paying taxes you can't afford, and constantly worrying about whether you'd have food for tomorrow. No Netflix, no coffee shops, no cozy bed waiting for you at the end of the day. Just endless survival. Oh, and hygiene. Let's just say you'd miss modern bathrooms after 5 minutes. Most people shared public latrines, yes, shared. No privacy. Just a row of stone seats with holes, all lined up side by side. And instead of toilet paper, there was a single communal sponge on a stick. Let's not even think too hard about that. And when it rained, the streets turned into rivers of dirty water, carrying away everything people threw out. If you slipped, congratulations, you just had the worst day of your life. If you stayed inside, you'd still deal with leaking roofs and smoky lamps that made your lungs ache. But wait, maybe you're thinking, at least Rome had beautiful buildings like the Colosseum. True, the Colosseum was impressive. But you know what it was mostly used for? Watching people die for entertainment. Gladiator fights, executions, wild animal hunts. It was all considered normal fun. And yes, the smell of blood and sweat filled the air. Not exactly the charming vacation spot you were imagining, is it? Even the water wasn't safe. Sure, Rome had aqueducts, but clean drinking water was a luxury. Most people drank wine mixed with water to make it safer, but the wine was cheap and sour. The food? mostly bread, olives, and whatever scraps you could afford. Forget about pizza, pasta, or anything that sounds remotely delicious. And let's not forget the diseases. With no real understanding of germs, illness spread like wildfire. A simple cut could get infected and kill you. A fever could wipe out entire neighborhoods. Doctors believed in strange cures, like mixing herbs with animal parts or draining your blood to balance your body. So if you got sick, your chances weren't great. Feeling tired yet? Good. That's what one day in Rome would do to you. By now, your sandals are ruined, your clothes are stained with the dust of the streets, and your stomach is turning from the smell of everything around you. The heat from the sun makes your head ache, and the noise of the crowd never stops. There's no quiet corner, no cool breeze, no escape out. Oh, but maybe you'd find peace at night? No, nights in Rome weren't peaceful. They were full of drunk men shouting in taverns, dogs barking, and thieves creeping through the alleys. Fires were common because people lit their homes with open flames. If you're lucky, you'd sleep on a straw mattress crawling with fleas. If you're unlucky, well, you wouldn't sleep at all. So yes, welcome to the Roman Empire. It's not the polished postcard you thought it would be. It's loud, dirty, dangerous, and exhausting. But hey, at least the architecture looks nice in paintings, right? Still, want to stay? Fine, let's keep going. So you've survived your first morning in ancient Rome. You've dodged carts, avoided falling into the open sewer, and somehow managed not to faint from the smell of the streets. Congratulations, you made it this far. But now your stomach is growling. You're hungry. Time to eat, right? Well, brace yourself, because Roman meals were not the glamorous feasts you've seen in movies. Sure, the rich elite sometimes had fancy banquets with roasted peacocks and endless courses, but you're not rich. You're an average person. And your daily meal is, let's just say it's not going to impress you. So what's for breakfast? Probably nothing. Romans didn't believe in breakfast as we do today. If you were lucky, you might get a bite of stale bread dipped in a bit of olive oil. That's it. No eggs, no cheese, no fruit smoothie waiting for you. Just hard bread that could crack a tooth if you weren't careful. Now let's move to the main meal of the day. Most Romans ate something called pulse, a kind of porridge made from grains, like wheat or barley. Sounds harmless, right? Well, it was bland, thick, and sometimes had tiny bits of vegetables or beans thrown in if you could afford them. Meat, forget it, that was a luxury. Most people went weeks without tasting even a scrap of it. And the bread. Oh, the bread. It was the cheapest, most common food, but also the most disappointing. Bakers reused old dough mixed with whatever they could find. Sometimes it had bits of sand or dirt in it because flour wasn't refined well. Mold was common. If you saw green spots, you just brushed them off and kept eating. Because what else could you do? Maybe you think, okay, at least there's wine. True, Romans drank wine with almost every meal. But don't get too excited. It wasn't the sweet, fresh wine you imagine today. It was sour, watery, and often mixed with strange things like seawater or herbs to hide the bad taste. And yes, they drank it because the water wasn't safe. Clean water was rare, so watered-down wine was the safer option, even if it made you grimace with every sip. Oh, and hygiene? Let's talk about that. Food preparation didn't exactly follow any health standards. Remember, there were no refrigerators. Meat and fish spoiled fast in the Roman heat. Spices were often used not for flavor, but to cover up the smell of food that was already going bad. And flies everywhere. Kitchen flies, street flies, market flies, all buzzing around your meal before you even got to it. Speaking of markets, that's where you'd get most of your food. You'd walk through crowded stalls, surrounded by shouting vendors, piles of vegetables coated in dust, and cuts of meat hanging out in the open air. The smell? a mix of fresh produce, rotten scraps, and the nearby open drains. If you bought fish, you had to cook it immediately before it turned slimy. If you bought olives, you hoped they weren't already infested with worms, and let's not forget about utensils or the lack of them. Most people ate with their hands. Communal bowls were shared, meaning everyone dipped into the same dish, washing hands. Maybe not. Soap existed but wasn't widely used, and clean water was still limited. So if the person before you had dirty hands, congratulations, you just shared their germs. Now, let's talk about the delicacies the rich ate because you might think you'd prefer those. Exotic dishes like stuffed dormice, honey-roasted insects, or garum fermented fish sauce that smelled as bad as it sounds. Even if you were rich enough to taste these, you'd probably lose your appetite. So back to you, the average Roman citizen. After a long day of work or walking through crowded streets, you sit down to eat your moldy bread, a bowl of tasteless porridge, maybe a handful of olives, and a cup of sour wine. That's your big meal of the day. You chew slowly, hoping it fills your stomach, but wait, don't eat too fast. Because you're also sharing your meal with unexpected guests, tiny bugs. Weevils were common in grain, worms in dried figs. And yes, sometimes you just ignored them and kept eating. You needed the calories, even if they came with extra protein. And remember the water I mentioned earlier? It wasn't clean. Even with aqueducts, contamination was everywhere. Pipes were sometimes made of lead, which slowly poisoned people over time. So when you mix water into your wine, you're really just adding another layer of maybe this will make me sick. If you live near the coast, maybe yeah. Wrong, because even if you're rich, stress is your full-time job. You're constantly worried about thieves, about rivals, about being accused of something you didn't do. And worst of all, you're always thinking about poison. That's right. Poisoning was a very real fear in high society. One wrong sip from the wrong cup, and it's game over. So you hire a food taster, someone who eats your meal first to make sure it won't kill you. Of course, that only works if they show symptoms before you do, which doesn't always happen. And then there are the family politics. Your cousin wants your land, your brother's eyeing your gold, your wife might be plotting with the neighbor. It's like living in a never-ending soap opera, but with daggers. You attend long public meetings, throw expensive parties to impress senators, and act like you love it all. But inside, you're exhausted. You can't trust anyone, and relaxing is dangerous. So even though your sandals are fancier, your heart is always racing. Oh, and retirement? That doesn't really exist here. Whether you're poor or rich, you work until your body or your enemies give up on you. Now, let's not forget the slaves. Yes, slavery was part of everyday life in ancient Rome. And if you were born into slavery, your job wasn't even called a job, it was your life. You worked from before dawn until long after dark without pay, without rights, and with punishment waiting around every corner. No matter how hard you worked, it was never enough. Even skilled slaves like teachers, doctors, or scribes had no freedom. They could be sold or punished at any moment. And if you were caught running away, the consequences were harsh in public. But here's the twist. Even the people in charge were miserable. The more powerful you were, the more enemies you had. Rome wasn't just built on hard labor, it was built on fear. Fear of failure, fear of poverty, fear of losing everything overnight. So if you're wondering whether there was any kind of balance or peace in Roman working life, the answer is no. Every person, no matter how high or low, was pushed by pressure, stress, and survival. You wake up each day not knowing if you'll make it through. And when you finally collapse into your straw mattress at night, muscles aching and mind spinning, you don't feel proud. You feel drained up, maybe, just maybe. You dream of something better. A simpler life, a life with glory. You close your eyes and picture yourself in the arena, under the sun, sword in hand, with a cheering crowd around you. You're dreaming of being a gladiator. Oh, that's worse. So you've worked yourself to the bone. You've scraped dirt from your skin in the bathhouse, eaten moldy bread, and survived the stress of Roman daily life. Now you're lying on your straw mattress, staring at the ceiling and dreaming of something more heroic. Maybe you're thinking, if I were a gladiator, at least I'd be famous. I'd have glory. I'd fight in the Colosseum, win battles, and everyone would chant my name. Ah yes, the gladiator fantasy. Let's crush that for you right now. First of all, how do you even become a gladiator? You don't just sign up for fun. Most gladiators were slaves, prisoners of war, or criminals. Some were so desperate for money or food that they volunteered. So congratulations, you're either owned by someone broke or being punished. Now, let's say you're taken to Elitis, a gladiator training school. Sounds exciting, right? Like a gym with swords. Wrong. It's basically a prison with slightly better food. You're locked up at night. You train from sunrise to sunset. Your body is pushed past exhaustion every day, and the trainers, they're not friendly coaches. They're strict, brutal, and quick to punish mistakes. Speaking of food, you're not eating steak dinners or protein shakes. Gladiators were fed a basic diet of barley, beans, and cheap porridge. It kept you alive and gave you a little extra fat, yes, fat, because a soft layer of fat might protect your organs from shallow cuts. So forget about being ripped with six-pack abs. You're more like a bulky, sweaty target. Then there's the training. You don't get a cool sword on day one. You start with wooden weapons. Day after day, you practice the same swings, the same stabs, until your arms feel like they're going to fall off. And if you think you're going to be trained like a noble warrior, think again. Gladiator fighting was about survival and showmanship, not honor. You were taught to entertain the crowd, not to live a long, peaceful life. And let's talk about fear. Every single day, you're surrounded by men who know that one day they might have to kill you. You sleep in the same barracks with the people who could be your future opponents. No friends. Just uneasy silence and nervous glances. Now, imagine the big day comes. The day you step into the arena. The Colosseum is huge. It can hold tens of thousands of people, all screaming, cheering, waiting for blood. You're shoved through the gates, and suddenly there's sunlight blinding you. The sand is hot under your feet. Across from you stands another gladiator, armed, ready, and probably just as scared as you. But here's the thing, you're not ready. How could you be? You've had weeks, maybe months of training. Your wooden sword has been replaced with something sharp and heavy. Your armor, it's not full protection. It's just bits of metal and leather, leaving most of your body exposed. Crowd roars, you can barely hear your own thoughts. You're sweating, shaking, trying not to drop your weapon. And then the fight begins. What do you think happens? Do you suddenly become a skilled warrior? No. You swing wildly, hoping to land a hit. Maybe you get lucky. Maybe you don't. But your opponent knows how to aim for the weak spots. A slash to your leg, a stab to your side. You stumble, you fall, and the crowd cheers louder. If by some miracle you win, you don't exactly celebrate. You're bleeding, gasping, and dragging yourself back to the holding area. And you know there's another fight waiting for you in a few days or weeks. Survival is temporary. And if you lose, well, here's the famous part. You're lying in the sand, wounded, helpless, looking up at the emperor or the crowd. They give the signal. Thumbs up, you live. Thumbs down, you die. Your life depends on their mood. Did they find the fight exciting? Did you entertain them enough? Or are they bored and want more blood? If they want you gone, your opponent gives the final blow. Quick or slow, it depends on their style. The crowd cheers again. Another life, taken for their amusement. Oh, and don't think you'll have fans writing poems about you. Most gladiators were forgotten after a few fights. Only a handful became true stars, and even they usually died young. The fame you're dreaming of, it lasts for a moment and disappears as soon as the next fight begins. Maybe you're thinking, well, at least I'd have honor. No, gladiators weren't respected like soldiers. They were considered property, disposable tools for entertainment. Even if you fought bravely, most people still saw you as a low-class performer, and let's not ignore the hidden dangers. You could survive the fight but die later from infection. Remember, Roman medicine wasn't exactly advanced. A single cut could kill you days later, and the arena wasn't exactly clean. It was covered in blood, sweat, and whatever else the last fighters left behind. So, would you really want to be a gladiator? You're malnourished, terrified, and surrounded by constant danger. You're trained to fight not because you're special, but because you're replaceable. Someone else is always waiting to take your place, and even if you survive a year or two, your body breaks down. Scars, broken bones, exhaustion. By then, you're too weak to fight well, and that's when the crowd loses interest. And when the crowd loses interest, well, you already know how that ends out, so if you're lying in your Roman bed at night, dreaming of fame in the Colosseum, remember this: there's nothing glamorous about dying for someone else's entertainment. You won't feel heroic. You'll feel terrified. But hey, at least the crowd enjoyed your death. So after surviving the gladiator fantasy in your mind, and thankfully not in reality, you're probably feeling sore, tired, and maybe a little sick. Your stomach is still upset from that spoiled bread. Your skin is itching from the bathhouse germs. And you think, maybe I just need a doctor. Yes, Roman medicine. Surely they'll take good care of you. Well, prepare to be disappointed. Roman, doctors didn't really understand the human body the way we do today. They believed in something called the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to them, if you were sick, it was because your humors were out of balance. Their brilliant solution: bleed you. Yes, they would literally drain some of your blood, thinking it would fix everything. Have a headache, bleed you. Fever, bleed you. Stubbed your toe, probably bleed you. It didn't matter what was wrong. Too much blood was always the answer, or at least they thought so. If bleeding didn't help, they moved to other cures. For example, if you had a migraine, they might crush up a mouse brain and mix it with honey. Then you'd eat it or rub it on your head. Imagine that smell. And no, it didn't really work. Got a stomach ache? Maybe they'd give you a drink made from vinegar and herbs. Or if they thought you had something worse, they might suggest swallowing bits of ground up oyster shells. If you survived the cure, maybe you'd survive the illness. And let's not forget the lovely practice of using animal parts for medicine. If you had epilepsy, they might recommend drinking the blood of a freshly killed gladiator because they believed it had life force. Sounds horrifying. It was, if you had wounds from an accident or a fight, you were in even more trouble. Roman doctors didn't know about germs. They didn't wash their... Oh, and let's not forget the thieves. Nighttime in Rome wasn't safe. Locked doors weren't common for poor apartments. A thief could sneak in quietly, take your only belongings, and disappear before you even woke up. Worse, sometimes thieves weren't quiet. Sometimes they came with knives, but maybe you're thinking, at least it's dark, so I can sleep through it. Not so fast. Rome at night was dark, yes, but also dangerous. People lit oil lamps or candles to see, and those open flames sometimes tipped over. Fires in the middle of the night were common, and in a wooden apartment building, fire spreads fast. If you hear someone shouting, "Fire!" you don't have much time. By the time you run out, the entire insula might already be gone dot, so you lie there, half asleep, half listening for the sound of crackling flames. Relaxing? Not really. Then there are the rats. Yes, Rome was full of them. They scurry through the streets during the day, but at night they come into buildings. You can hear them scratching at the walls, nibbling on anything edible. Sometimes they even crawl onto beds, searching for crumbs. If you're lucky, they just steal your leftover bread. If you're not lucky, they bite. Add to that the constant itch of fleas. They live in your straw bed, in your clothes, on your skin. You scratch and scratch, but it never really stops. Some nights you wonder if you'll ever feel truly clean again. Spoiler, you won't. And then there's the fear of collapse. Remember, those insulae, the Roman apartment buildings, weren't built very well. They were tall, narrow, and unstable. Whole buildings sometimes fell down overnight without warning. If you lived on an upper floor, you were especially at risk. People sometimes preferred to sleep outside in courtyards just in case, but let's pretend you somehow feel safe in your tiny, dark room. You've blocked out the noise, ignored the rats, and convinced yourself there won't be a fire tonight. Maybe now you can finally relax, not so fast. Because if you're poor, you're probably not sleeping alone. Whole families shared one small room. Children crying, someone snoring loudly, people rolling over and bumping into you. It's not exactly peaceful. Privacy doesn't exist here. What if you're rich? Surely that's better, right? Yes and no. A wealthy Roman might sleep in a nicer bed, in a bigger house, but even then, it wasn't calm. You still feared thieves, especially those from your own household. Servants could betray you. Slaves could escape. Poisoners could slip something into your evening wine. Even in luxury, you slept lightly, always wondering who might be plotting against you. And let's not forget bugs. Even the rich couldn't escape them. Mosquitoes buzzed through open courtyards. Lice lived in sheets and clothing. No one was truly free from tiny nighttime pests. Then there's the weather. In the summer, your room is boiling hot. No fans, no breeze, just still heavy air that makes it impossible to sleep. In winter, it's freezing cold. You wrap yourself in whatever cloth you have and hope it's enough. And when you finally do drift off into uneasy sleep, your dreams aren't peaceful either. They're filled with the stress of the day-crowded streets, hard work, fear of illness, and the constant thought that tomorrow will be the same, if you even make it to tomorrow. Sometimes you're woken by the sound of shouting outside, maybe a drunk fight, maybe soldiers passing through, or maybe the fire bell. Your heart races every time you hear it, wondering if you'll need to run. So yes. Even sleep wasn't really rest in ancient Rome. It was more like a temporary pause from the chaos. A few hours lying still, hoping the night doesn't bring more trouble than the day. The truth is, in the Roman Empire, you never really felt safe. Not during the day, not at night. You just learned to live with the noise, the dirt, the bugs, and the fear. So if you're imagining yourself lying in a calm, Roman bedroom with soft sheets and gentle silence, erase that picture from your mind. The reality was loud, itchy, smelly, and risky. So yes, even your dreams would be uncomfortable. So you've made it through an entire day in the Roman Empire. Somehow you've survived the dirty streets, the spoiled food, the germ-filled bathhouse, the endless work, the nightmare of Roman medicine, and the sleepless, noisy nights. Congratulations, I guess. But here's the thing. Even if you somehow managed to live for more than a day, it wouldn't really matter. Because in ancient Rome, you weren't special. You were just one more face in a massive crowd of millions. Unlike everyone else, you would be forgotten. Think about it. Most Romans never had their names written down anywhere. No birth certificates, no school yearbooks, no photos to remember them by. If you were lucky, someone might carve your name on a cheap clay tablet. If you were very lucky, maybe your family would mark your grave with a simple stone. But after a few years, no one would visit. No one would remember. If you were rich, maybe your name would last a little longer. You'd build a statue or a monument, but even those crumbled over time. Whole buildings have been lost, whole families erased. Even emperors, the most powerful people in Rome, were eventually reduced to just a paragraph in a dusty history book. So what chance would you have? And let's not forget how short life really was. The average Roman didn't live very long. Diseases, accidents, fires, wars, everything worked against you. Many people didn't even reach 40. Children often didn't survive past the age of 5. Life was fast, hard, and fragile. Even if you did make it to old age, there was no peaceful retirement. No quiet village by the sea, no warm blanket to wrap yourself in. Old age in Rome meant weak bones, bad teeth, and very little help. You'd just fade away. And what about your legacy? Well, you wouldn't really have one. Maybe your children would remember you for a while, but they'd be too busy trying to survive their own hard lives. And their children would forget you even faster. Within 2 or 3 generations, it would be as if you never existed at all. Rome was a city that devoured people. It took their labor, their sweat, their lives, and left almost nothing behind. The rich used the poor. The powerful used the weak. And when someone was gone, life moved on without a pause. There was no grand farewell, no soft music, just silence. So yes, you wanted to live in the Roman Empire. Hope you enjoyed the worst possible time machine trip. You saw the crowded streets, full of filth and noise. You ate the stale bread, drank the sour wine, and pretended it was fine. You scraped off the day's dirt in the bathhouse, only to leave with more germs. You worked until your hands bled. You dreamed of glory in the arena, only to realize it meant dying for other people's amusement. And when you got sick, the doctor made it worse. And at night, when you thought you'd finally find peace, there were fleas in your bed, rats in your room, and thieves outside your door. That was life. That was normal. So why do people romanticize this? Why do they picture Rome as some grand paradise of togas and marble? Maybe it's because time erases the smells, the sounds, and the suffering. Paintings and history books show us the beauty of Roman statues and temples, but not the pain of the people who lived there. The truth is simple. You wouldn't have been a hero. You wouldn't have been an emperor. You wouldn't have been some famous gladiator or wealthy philosopher. You'd be what most people were: tired, hungry, stressed, and replaceable. And when you were gone, the city would keep going like you were never there. Another tenant would move into your tiny apartment. Someone else would take your job. Someone else would fight in the arena. The streets would still smell. The crowds would still shout. Rome would miss you. So no, the Roman Empire wasn't a glamorous place you'd want to visit. It was hard. It was dangerous. It was exhausting. It was a place where you were born, struggled, and disappeared, just one of millions of forgotten lives. But here's the comforting part. You don't live there. You're here, in a world where your bed is soft, your room is safe, and your food doesn't try to kill you. You have clean water. You have medicine that actually works. You can lock your door at night and sleep without listening for fires or thieves. So tonight, when you close your eyes, be grateful you're not in Rome. Be glad you're not lying on a bed of fleas, in a room full of rats, waiting for someone to break in. Now rest easy tonight. Your bed is clean, quiet, and you won't wake up to the smell of sewage. Sleep.